Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Blessings to all fellow Dhamma practitioners. Regularly people come and ask monks questions like, what did the Buddha teach? What is Buddhism? And so on. As we know, the Buddha in brief, he taught about suffering and the end of suffering, or what we summarize in the Four Noble Truths, Arya Satya Dhamma. That is, this life has this experience we call dukkha, suffering. This is what the Buddha pointed it out. We all know that anyway, but he just explained it very clearly and used that as a starting point for his teaching, saying, well, we as human beings have this problem. We experience different kinds of suffering, physical and mental suffering, and nobody likes it. Nobody wants suffering, nobody wants pain, discomfort, unhappiness. Then the second noble truth is, well, this suffering has a cause. Ignorance, craving, and attachment. But if we abandon the cause, then we can experience the third noble truth, which is the end of suffering, the cessation of suffering. And the way we abandon the cause of suffering is through cultivating the path, the Noble Eightfold Path. We call it dukkha, samudaya, nirodha, magga. This is the central teachings or message of the Buddha. But it's not just a message, it's not just a philosophy to believe in or that explains life. It's also a way of living, a method for living in the world, living our life skillfully for the end of suffering. And suffering can be abandoned very quickly. There's a tendency when you hear the Buddhist teachings and hear this explanation of the Four Noble Truths that to sort of feel like it's something that you're working towards, and then one day in the distant future, or maybe even in a distant lifetime, then you'll understand the Four Noble Truths and finish with suffering and reach Nibbana and reach the end of suffering. But actually the place of practice is right here, right now, in the present moment. And that applies for everyone. Another opinion people seem to have, or view of it that people have, is that the practice of the Four Noble Truths is something that you do in a monastery or a temple or as a monk. It's something for those who are able to practice in those situations. It's something, again, that's sort of far away from daily life or separate from daily life. But actually the way the Buddha was encouraging us to look at these Four Noble Truths is that they're arising and manifesting all the time, moment to moment through our day. The suffering is arising every moment of the day when we lose our awareness, as we've just seen when we meditate. When you have mindfulness, you feel quite calm and your mind is in a good place. When you lose your mindfulness, you start to understand how suffering can arise, because you easily get disturbed, distracted. That's going on all the time. The Four Noble Truths are a very direct teaching and very directly applicable to everyday life. right here, right now. As you're listening to this talk, they're going on all the time, whether you realize it or not. So the real challenge is just realizing the Four Noble Truths through our life, from moment to moment, day by day. They're not something that's far away, way over there, or physically far away in a monastery somewhere, on a hill somewhere, or in a quiet place somewhere, or far away in terms of time, something that you'll maybe, when you retire from your busy life, then you'll have a chance to study and learn about the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are happening right here, right now, as you're living, breathing, doing your thing. And that's why we make the practice and development of this Eightfold Noble Path. If once you have faith in the Buddha, then you're aiming to make the cultivation of the Eightfold Path central to your life. If you think about it, one aspect of the Eightfold Noble Path is what we call right action, and then another is right livelihood. So the very way we earn our living is already part of the Buddhist path, what the Buddha taught. And the Buddha gave guidelines, how to earn your living, to do it in a way that is honest and not harming or exploiting others, even not harming or exploiting animals, creatures, or certainly not human beings. So to earn your living in an honest way, why did he encourage us to do that? Well, because then you don't have to deal with the consequences of earning your living in a way where you're hurting, harming others. Because that brings us all kinds of problems, doesn't it? Regrets, fears, suspicion, negativity in our own mind, maybe negative results in other people when we earn our living in a way that hurts them. So already just the way we go about our business in the world, earning our living, is already part of this path that leads to the end of suffering. And the more you study and listen to the Dhamma, I think you'll probably find the more you appreciate that everything is part of the practice. Right speech, right action. These are also, every day we're acting, we're doing things every day, every moment of every day we're doing things. Every moment of every day, or much of the time, we speak. We speak to each other. Or even if you're on your own, you're still often speaking to yourself internally, having conversations in your mind, following different trains of thought. This is all the Four Noble Truths in practice. So it's something to keep bringing up, just to recognize that these Four Noble Truths apply to all aspects of our life, all the time. They're not something separate from, say you're at work, they're not something separate from your work. It's something you do on your holiday when you go on a retreat. Although you might feel like that, when you're on holiday or on your weekend, that's the time you practice Buddhism, practice mindfulness, listen to the Dhamma, and then when you're at work or doing the more mundane activities of daily life, somehow you're not practicing. Maybe that's the first hurdle to get over in understanding what the Buddha was pointing to, is that your body and mind is the place of practice. The place of practice is not far away, it's right here. He said, this fathom-long body. A fathom, I can't remember what it is. Is it 6 foot, 2 yards? Sort of most people are somewhere between 5 and 6 foot long. So he said, this fathom-long body is your place of practice. And your body is with you 24/7, wherever you are, whoever you are. You're young, old, you've just been born, you're on your deathbed, you're male, you're female, you're indoors, you're outdoors, you're at work, you're at school, you're at home, you're asleep, you're awake. Your body and mind is with you all the time. So your place of practice is right here, right now. So getting over that hurdle of seeing the Four Noble Truths and the practice and the teaching of the Buddha as something separate from where you are and what you're doing right now is a huge step in the right direction if you want to understand what the Buddha was pointing to and experience some of this, the happiness of and the end of suffering that we're all seeking. Of course, there are times when we maybe are able to direct our energies, our attention more specifically to the practice, say like right now listening to Dhamma, or when you have time to do some formal meditation, sitting, walking meditation, or when you have time to go to a Buddhist center or monastery or whatever. Sure, there are times where your situation is more conducive to the practice perhaps. But you also have to see that the Four Noble Truths are taking place, they're active all the time, wherever you are. So one thing people find is that the more they listen to the Dhamma and learn to practice mindfulness in daily life, practice meditation, maybe undertake precepts, the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts, the more their thinking starts to be informed by Dhamma teachings, by the Dhamma that the Buddha taught. You might say that the more you practice, the more you start to think Dhamma, even though you have to think about other things. We all have to think about, say you have a job, well, you have to think about your job, how to get that job done successfully, how to please the boss, how to get results from what you do. You go to work, you have to think how to get to work in the morning, you have to plan your day, plan your time. When you're out of work, you have to plan about, what things you need to buy to keep yourself fed and clothed and buy the essentials, obtain the essentials of life. Of course, we have to think about all these different things. And we're always thinking about entertainments and relationships and things that bring us pleasure. So even when you're working, your mind drops into pleasure-seeking and fantasies half the time. So of course our mental activity is full of thoughts about all kinds of stuff. But for one who regularly practices the Dhamma and commits to it as a sort of a way of life or something important, you have this experience where you start to think Dhamma, not just believe Dhamma. It starts as a belief, doesn't it? When you call yourself a Buddhist, you may say to your friend, I'm a Buddhist and I believe that the Buddha was wise, compassionate, enlightened person, and I go to the temple and I make offerings and make merit and I believe it's a good thing, or I listen to Dhamma talks, or I do chanting and I believe it's a good thing. Often you start your practice like that. But over time, the actual aim is to incorporate the themes of the Four Noble Truths and cultivating the different qualities of the path on a daily basis to the point where you're actually starting to think Dhamma. Think about your activities and actions through your day. Is checking yourself or reviewing, is what I'm doing in line with the 5 precepts? Or if you're starting to experience stress in a situation, where is this stress coming from? What's happening in my mind? Why do I feel stressed? How stressed am I? How bad is it? And so on. Starting to introduce the Dhamma in the normal way you think, you might say is a sign of progress in your practice. Where you actually introduce some Buddhist themes in the way you relate to the world and relate to the activities and the way you spend your time and the way you relate to other people and so on. And of course you'll notice the Buddhist teachings are wide and varied. The more you read, the more you study, the more you listen, well, there are teachings on pretty much everything, aren't there? Every aspect of life. But the challenge is to bring them into your mind so you're actually thinking Dhamma as you go along. And again, people often feel that the Dhamma is something separate from their more mundane material life. So you go to work and that's one thing, and then Dhamma practice is separate. But your aim is to actually introduce the Dhamma during your day. Say you go to work, as you do a job of work, as you relate to the people, if you have to engage with other people, as you have to do different tasks that you're assigned or that come under your responsibility, how do you do them in a way that is furthering your practice of and understanding of the Four Noble Truths for the end of suffering? And to see that your work, your family life, your single life, if you're single, every aspect of your life can become part of the practice. Eating, you think about it, even just eating a meal. You can eat the meal as a Dhamma practice. You can cook your meal, eat your meal. You can procure your food by going shopping as a Dhamma practice. Or you just, what is more common, especially in the beginning, is you just let your mind go all over the place and you're not thinking of Dhamma, you're not relating to the Four Noble Truths as you go about these more normal tasks. But over time, if you practice regularly, maybe you start to become more mindful in daily life, and you're driving your car, you're doing a job of work, you're shopping, you're with your friends in a position where you're having some recreation, some free time. How can that become part of your Dhamma practice, or how much of it is becoming part of your Dhamma practice? And maybe this is one challenge that all Buddhists face, but even in monasteries and certainly in the lay life, how to think Dhamma and incorporate the Dhamma practice more in our daily life. And the more you listen to the Dhamma and practice, you realize, well, actually everything the Buddha was teaching is pointing to this very thing, this very fact, so that we need to practice the Dhamma in all postures. When we talk about the practice of mindfulness, the Buddha began by saying, practice mindfulness in all postures, meaning be mindful and have present moment awareness, whether you're standing, walking, sitting, or lying down. So if you go to work, you're still in a posture, aren't you? You're either sitting or standing or walking. You can practice mindfulness in all activities. As thoughts and feelings come up during your day, as you're doing a job of work and you have to think about tasks and get things done and assess things and understand things and communicate with other people and meet deadlines and have meetings and so on, you can relate to all of that as part of your Dhamma practice. The more you practice, the more you can do that. Maybe you can even set it as a personal challenge. How can I make the other parts of my life fit into the Four Noble Truths and fit into my practice? So you notice when you're more mindful, you can do it quite well. You say when you're more aware and you're consciously bringing up mindfulness, you can be aware of craving and attachment arising in a situation. Not just when you're on a meditation cushion, but in the middle of your day, craving and attachment can arise at any time, can't it? As you're doing a task, and maybe there's some pressure, there's deadline of time, and you have to get a certain job done by a certain time to satisfy some requirements or satisfy a person who's in charge of you. That may bring up pressure, and then you observe your state of mind. Oh, I'm getting stressed, feeling pressured because I've got a deadline, I've got to get this job done. But at the same time, you can pause and say, oh, how does this fit into my Dhamma practice? How can I prevent my mind falling into an unwholesome state at this point? Because we understand when we lose our mindfulness, get caught up into some greed or anger or some unwholesome state of mind, that's the cause of suffering and brings its result. We feel more stressed, more unhappy. That can take place at any time in your day, can't it? So if you can bring up the mindfulness to know when you're falling into an unwholesome state of mind or train of thought, catch that, recognize what's going on in your mind at that time, you're starting to think Dhamma, aren't you? You're thinking the Four Noble Truths, you're thinking Dhamma, and you're saying, oh, this is the suffering that I have to let go of. If you're in that situation, it may not change much at all on the outside. You still have a job of work you have to do, you still have that deadline, but now you're also observing yourself, the Dhamma practitioner in that situation, what's going on in your mind. You're observing the arising of maybe unwholesome mind states expressed in feelings of tension or negativity that's coming up. May even be expressed in your body, and your body starts to feel tense over time if you keep falling into negative states of mind. But now you notice that in the course of your day, even in the course of a busy day, you start to notice these things. If you're regularly practicing the Dhamma, you can bring up this reflection and say, oh, hold on, I'm doing this job, but I'm also feeling stressed. Is there anything I can do here to relieve the stress or let go of this stress? What did the Buddha say? Well, the Buddha said craving and attachment is the cause of stress. So you go back, observe your mind, you may see just your compulsion, your desire to get a job done, perhaps, the pressure of time, the pressure of needing to finish some work is starting to make you feel stressed in some way or frustrated in that situation, and you can notice that. You say, oh, there's something here I can actually do to improve the situation. I can maybe even let go of some suffering right here, right now. Bringing out mindfulness, being patient with the situation, but then consciously letting go of the negative thought at that moment. And you're seeing the Four Noble Truths in practice in the middle of your busy day, if that's what you have to deal with, but consciously letting go of some unwholesome mental states that have arisen in a situation. And we can do that at any time. We can bring up mindfulness, we can let go of some stressful thinking, some anger, irritation, frustration, worry, anxiety. When we become mindful in daily life, we start to think Dhamma, because once you're mindful, then the Dhamma that you've learned and thought about in the past can start to act, come up in your mind and have a good effect. But you need to bring the mindfulness up, and you need to be willing to practice, even in those difficult situations when you may be busy at work and you have no immediate thought of Dhamma, but if you're feeling stressed, suddenly you realize, oh, there's some Dhamma teachings here and Dhamma practices that can help me in this situation. From what I can see, people can do this, whether it's going to work, just driving, at work, coming home, dealing with family situations where you have the pressure of family life. Everybody has their own interests, their own things that they're doing, but you also are living together under one roof. Can set up all kinds of situations where you feel stressed or you feel irritated, fed up, bored, whatever. All of that can also become time when you bring up mindfulness and reflect on your own state of mind as you're going through your day. Of course, hopefully a lot of your day and a lot of your life is fairly ordinary and not particularly stressful. That would be a sign that you've achieved a certain level of happiness in your life. But still, there will be the moments when stress arises, and that's where we rely on the Dhamma. So one of the aims of the Buddha was to get us to practice and incorporate or apply the Dhamma in daily life. At work, at home, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, in the middle of the night, traveling, sitting still, whatever. Having your shower is still a time for Dhamma practice. There's really nothing that cannot be part of the Dhamma practice. So it's something we have to keep reminding ourselves until it sticks, until the practice of mindfulness, the development of mindfulness, and then the reflection on the Dhamma, on the Four Noble Truths, starts to become more normal for you, whoever you are, wherever you are. But in the beginning, we have to work at it. And that's why we need to keep associating with Kalyana Mitta, other fellow practitioners, because when you hear about their practicing and their experience, it helps you in your experience. Listening to the Dhamma gives you some background information that you can bring up again later. Maybe you listen to a Dhamma talk like now when you're peaceful, sitting still, and you probably find, oh, this is really helpful, I understand, and it makes sense, and it's useful. But then when the talk's finished, you go away. Perhaps all of that Dhamma sort of drains away from your mind, and you're back to a more mundane, ordinary state of mind, and you're worrying about what you're going to do tomorrow, and you've got a few memories or regrets coming up bothering you. You're back to your normal state of mind, and the Dhamma talk and the Dhamma you've heard in the past seems to have all disappeared. So what do? Well, that's why we practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is the bridge between the situation where some stress or suffering is arising. Then you have the thought, what can I do about this? And you bring up mindfulness. So you may have various techniques to do that. In your day, you're feeling stressed, so you go back to the breath, even for like 3 breaths in the middle of your busy day, going to 3 breaths, just bring up the breath, breathe in, breathe out for a few moments, can re-establish mindfulness. Or it may be mindfulness of your precepts, your 5 precepts. You remind yourself, what am I saying? What am I doing in this situation? And you determine to use the 5 precepts as a way of training yourself to be harmless, not to kill, not to be aggressive, to be honest, not to steal, to be content with what you've got, to be honest in your relationships, so you're not seeking extra additional relationships or practicing any form of sexual misconduct. And to be honest in your speech, honest in your speech, so you speak the truth and you don't say things that are malicious or divisive between people. And then your commitment to sobriety. That can be how you begin practicing mindfulness in daily life, checking whether you're still within the guidelines of the 5 precepts. Or on a more deeper level, maybe the breath. You use the breath as a meditation object through your day, and from time to time you come back to the breath. Once you've established mindfulness, we call that the path. That's the fourth noble truth. You're bringing your awareness back to your body and mind in that situation, even if you're very busy or active or moving around doing this, doing that. You can still cultivate mindfulness in these different situations. You can be mindful of your speech, mindful of your action. So that's the path. And then as the path comes up and the mindfulness comes up, you can see more clearly the cause of suffering and use the path, the quality of mindfulness, to facilitate letting go of the cause of suffering. That particular craving or attachment, that negative state of mind that is the cause of suffering that has arisen in that situation. It's what we call the practice of right effort, abandoning an unwholesome state of mind that's arisen, or even preventing it arising. If you're sharp enough, you know you're about to get angry, or some form of selfishness or jealousy is forming in your mind, but you catch it very quickly and abandon it. What we have to remember is, although we practice meditation and listen to the Dhamma, suffering often arises in at these other times when you're not meditating and you're not listening to the Dhamma and you're not in the temple and you're not anywhere near anything Buddhist at all. You're out in the world. That's often the time you really need the Four Noble Truths and the reflection on the Four Noble Truths. And that's about practicing, getting in the habit of bringing your mind back to the Dhamma. And that's why you need the mindfulness to pay attention to what's going on from time to time through your day, and then reflecting on the Four Noble Truths. Oh, I feel really stressed here. Where's this coming from? What do I need to do about it? Ajahn Chah used to say, just having the reflection, what do I need to let go of here, is a kind of a phrase you can bring up in so many different situations. You're feeling sad, that maybe is a sign that you're clinging to something and you become disappointed because you didn't get what you want, or something you had has passed by. You could be, you hear the news, someone you love or like has passed away, or some situation that was, some success or some happiness you had is now finished. It could be anything, but the sadness, the disappointment comes up. That's where you have to introduce the mindfulness and say, oh, hold on, I'm clinging to this. That's why I feel sad. So you introduce the Four Noble Truths into the way you're thinking in a certain situation. Or you're getting upset, angry about someone else's behavior or something that's happened. That anger comes up, and at some point you have to introduce the mindfulness and say, oh, hold on, I'm getting angry here. This is suffering, and what is it I need to let go of in this situation? Maybe there's something you want and you haven't noticed that, so you're pressured by your own wanting in a situation. Maybe you want to get something, you want to achieve something, get something, be successful in something, or get some pleasure, some happiness. That wanting is already bringing up some pressure in your mind, and perhaps you haven't noticed yet, but then the pressure gets so strong that you start to feel unhappy, or irritated, frustrated, angry. So as you establish mindfulness, you say, what do I need to let go of here? Then you go back and you look and say, oh, really, the problem is I want this and I haven't got it yet, so I'm feeling angry because this person or this situation is stopping me getting what I want, so then I react with anger. You need the mindfulness, which brings a certain equanimity or detached awareness, and then you introduce the reflection, which may be as simple as what do I need to let go of here? So it's a sort of personal investigation of your stress as it comes up in the course of your day. And that's something you practice, you train in. Sure, many times we don't get it, do we? We become stressed, and we may be stressed for a long time before we start saying, oh, hold on, there's a way out of this. What do I need to let go of? That could take ages before that comes up. But the idea is if you practice, then you get better at it. It comes up quicker. You establish mindfulness quicker. You start reflecting on your experience quicker and more fluently or more easily. And then you say, oh, there's something I'm attached to here. I should really let this go. Of course, the first time you have to let go of something, it's hard because your mind doesn't want to let go. It's, say when you're caught into ambition, you say, I've got to get this. I can't give in. I can't give up. I'm not going to let go. But if you keep establishing some awareness and you look at your mind and your experience, you might also notice, but this ambition is really causing me a lot of suffering here. Do I need this suffering? Do I have to suffer in this way? Maybe there's something I need to let go of here. So you just relax your desire a bit, the desire to get that thing, get the promotion, get more money, get the person to like you, get this success, this job done. You say, okay, I'm still doing it. It's not you just give up, but I'm going to relax my desire, my ambition a little bit. Then I feel better in that moment. That's what I need to let go of, to be more peaceful in that moment. So it's like a little realization of the Four Noble Truths in your day. Something happens that causes stress, but then you realize that the real cause of the stress is not external to you, it's not other people, not the things going on around you. It's an internal thing. and you start to think Dhamma. That might be thinking of what do I need to let go of, and then you let go. You let go of that particular train of thought. You relax, or you accept something that is difficult to accept, perhaps. And then the mind goes quiet, doesn't it, in that situation? And if you experience that a few times, you start to get what you need to do. People often think you're practicing like this, practicing letting go of attachment in the midst of working or doing your thing, you're at home, whatever. They think that's going to make people very passive, not bother to seek any kind of progress in their life, not bother to improve, not improve themselves, get on in life. They think it will make them passive, but you have to remember the Four Noble Truths are directed particularly at your suffering. Nobody likes to suffer. Nobody wants to suffer. If you can work, you can still be keen to get on in your work, get the job done, get promoted, get success in your work. You may still want that. But what you're removing is the suffering, the stress that you're unnecessarily creating as you work, as you do a job. Or in relationships, you want somebody to follow your way of doing things, or see things your way, and you follow you, and they're not. It's not that you quit your relationship or you give up on that person, but you're just accepting you won't always get what you want. And you're letting go maybe of some desire to control a relationship or control a situation perhaps that is causing you stress. So the Four Noble Truths, the result of practicing them is that you improve your mindfulness and then you start to think Dhamma. And as you think Dhamma, you practice letting go of stress and suffering. But the idea is not to give up on life or lead you to some kind of passive state where you can't learn new things or improve your world and your life or get on in life. It's simply removing the suffering as you do that. So as we practice, the idea is to introduce these themes of practice, the Noble Eightfold Path, Four Noble Truths, into your daily life. So it could be, even when we're enjoying life, we're going on holiday, everyone's going on holiday at this time of year. So you go on holiday, fine. But if you're enjoying your holiday, fine, good. We're happy for you. But remember, all holidays, all good things come to an end. Maybe that's the Four Noble Truths as well. You have some enjoyable experience. It may even last for many days or even weeks. You meet friends, family, relatives, you go places, enjoy all kinds of pleasures. Fine. But maybe in that situation, the Four Noble Truths is you just become aware, you recognize the changing nature of conditions. Holidays come to an end. There's the excitement at the beginning of the holiday. What are we going to do? The anticipation, the hoping that it will be successful. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. You usually have a mixture, don't you? You go on holiday, you have some good experiences and some disasters, and maybe you go on holiday and you just catch COVID or something and spend your holiday in bed. Who knows? But the idea is to see, the Four Noble Truths are still at work when you go on holiday. You're lying on the beach. That will come to an end. It's impermanent. If you have craving, I wish this would last forever and ever, well, you're going to suffer, aren't you? But if you introduce the Four Noble Truths and you cultivate some mindfulness, reflect, craving and attachment will only lead to suffering. I have to let go and accept this beautiful holiday, this enjoyable situation will come to an end. Well, you can still enjoy it, but then you also know it comes to an end. All good things come to an end. All bad things also come to an end. So if you do get ill on holiday, well, that will also come to an end. But you introduce Dhamma thinking even when you're on holiday, or you're traveling, or you're back at work, back at school. The idea is to use what we have, the teachings of the Buddha, to help us understand life better and to internalize them, bring them back so that you're going about your business, but now you're introducing the Dhamma, because the Dhamma leads to wisdom or truth. Dhamma is truth. There's another word for the Dhamma, is the truth. And the more you contemplate and reflect on the Dhamma, then the more you're bringing your thinking, your view of the world in line with truth. So you see the value of practicing precepts because it brings you the happiness of lack of regret, not acting in ways that bring all kinds of harm back to you. You're training your mind in skillful intentions, practicing mindfulness in daily life through meditation, but also in work and every activity you're involved with. And then reflecting on the Dhamma to abandon craving and attachment, which is the cause of suffering. You've seen the value of that, so then you introduce it more and more into your life. So we have this phrase, the Dhamma protects those who practice the Dhamma. How does it protect you? Well, the truth is the truth. So if you can see, when I hold on to negative states of mind, I'm suffering, therefore it's better to let them go. That's the Dhamma protecting you, isn't it? The Dhamma is saying, let it go, this anger, this greed, this jealousy, this frustration, this anxiety, this fear. Once you identified craving and attachment and you know what it does to you, makes you suffer, then you're motivated to let it go. That's the Dhamma looking after you or protecting you. So you see it, when people practice this, then they can enjoy life much more, even the ups and downs of life, even when things go wrong, you can still keep your mind fairly calm by using the Dhamma. So you go on holiday, you catch COVID, okay, it's a disaster, it's not what you want, but you don't have to get angry or upset about it. You just introduce Four Noble Truths. All things are impermanent. This body is impermanent. What arises passes away. Rather than just going to craving and attachment, getting upset and blaming everyone and cursing the world, you just say, this is the way it is. What do I need to let go of here? I let go of my negative reaction to catching COVID or getting a stomach bug or whatever it is that happens, or breaking your leg when you go skiing and you come back with a broken leg, whatever it is. You learn to use the Dhamma to help you free your mind from suffering in that situation, rather than just become a victim of your own conditioning, which is what we do much of the time. What are the disadvantages of not having Dhamma in your mind, not seeing the Four Noble Truths, not bringing up mindfulness, not reflecting on the Dhamma? The disadvantages are your mind is ruled by craving, attachment, and it goes to suffering, doesn't it? So even things that we are hoping to enjoy can become suffering when we lose the Dhamma. Work becomes suffering when you lose the Dhamma. It just becomes a chore or a burden, or competition with other people, and it can become very miserable very quickly. Holidays can become miserable. Everything can become suffering when we lose the Dhamma, when we stop practicing mindfulness, when we forget about the Dhamma. But when we introduce the Dhamma into our thinking and we get used to that, we practice it over and over again, you get better at it, you get better at letting go of what you need to let go of, or at least asking the questions, so you can look more deeply. What is it I need to let go of here? Is the problem, that person, or is the problem what I think about that person? Is the problem my pain in my leg, or what I think about the pain in the leg? What you think about it is the craving and attachment. The pain in the leg is just a pain in the leg. The person is just a person who's, beyond your control. They have to sort themselves out. But what you think about them, that's your suffering, if that's what you're attaching to, your reaction to them, your liking, your disliking. That's where you have to apply the Dhamma. So if you practice regularly, you introduce the Dhamma more as the way you think. You start to think Dhamma. And you start to have you have methods and ways to let go of stress. And that's the purpose of it. You might say the Buddha gave us the perfect stress management, stress reduction, stress cessation system that the world has ever known. And just because the world, the modern world has changed a lot since the time of the Buddha, it doesn't mean to say the same truths don't apply. Human beings still have the same mind. They still get caught into the same old kinds of problems. Worry, fear, anger, desire, jealousy. These same old things are happening now as they did in the time of the Buddha. What causes us the most suffering probably is, you attach to a person that you love. So your partner, your child, your close friend, you attach to them, and then when time comes to separate from them, you're sad. People asked that question of the Buddha, and he said, yeah, you attach to a person, you're going to suffer if you haven't yet seen the attachment. If you can see the attachment, you accept that relationship, one day you have to separate from them, then you can be at peace because you know that's the natural way of things. But until you've seen it, your mind is not going to accept it, so you'll suffer. You'll grieve, you'll be sad, you'll be upset, you'll be angry. That was true in the time of the Buddha, and it's just as true today, isn't it? That hasn't changed. Human beings are still attaching to each other, clinging to each other so much that as soon as any kind of separation occurs, we're upset, we're sad, we suffer. And it doesn't just have to be the separation of death, just the separation of, you love someone and then you don't see them for a while. Oh, already your mind is longing for them, thinking about them, missing them. And then when they come back, when they're with you, you get upset in another way, don't you? You attach to them, so then you get angry when they don't do what you want. But craving and attachment causes us suffering in this day and age, just as it did in that day and age. Nothing has changed on that front. The Four Noble Truths are still just as useful to us today as they were 2,500 years ago. So I'd encourage you to reflect on them, bring them into your daily life, at home, at work, wherever, whatever, and start to think Dhamma. And the more you think Dhamma, the more you can free yourself from suffering. So maybe I'll leave those reflections with you tonight, and we can see if anyone has any questions after this.
Handamayang Dhammakataya Sadhu Karang Dadamase Sadhu 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 Anumodami